Are you ready for my mildly off-putting dream series part 2? This dream is off-putting in a completely different way. This dream made me make this channel. The other dream was kind of a warm-up for this one. Just a teaser to the inside of my brain. This dream, you were inside and sitting on a chair for the entire duration. Well, most of it. You're looking out of this multi-pane window. It's got 6 segments of this curved window. It is in a house on top of a hill. At the base of the house, there's this overgrown garden. And this garden is mostly made up of these huge, massive burgundy and white leaves. They're white on the outside with little splotches of burgundy on the inside. Almost like blood on a clean linen sheet. And they're just everywhere. They're surrounding the house perfectly, like the house is the center of some eerie flower. These beautiful, beautiful leaves are intermittently dispersed with other little plants. And they stand out in stark contrast of the dusty yellow-gray ground. The ground is dusty yellow-gray because it's the top of a hill. And the hill is made of these bubbly, craggly rocks. And you go down this hill that is covered in cliffs and steep, fast drops. It'd be very treacherous to climb down. And at the base of this hill is this small but immaculately maintained grassy area. And this grassy area is bordered by the hill closest to you, a desert to the right, a lake to the back, and a garden to the left. The garden is lush and filled to the brim with wildlife. You can't see the wildlife because the rose bushes are overgrown and thorny and they hide it from you. But they can't hide the movement. They rustle and ripple. Sometimes it's the wind, sometimes it is not the wind. The lake behind the grass is this beautiful teal color. It starts very shallow, maybe hip deep at most, and it goes to infinitely deep in the back. It's unfathomably deep. You know that this lake is warm. You know that this lake is fed by hot springs. It is just knowledge that you have. You possess this knowledge. And bordering the lake is a row of cottonwood trees. And at the back of the lake, they are short. And as they come closer to the hill, they get taller and further apart. And there are these 2 gorgeous, massive cottonwood trees that frame your view of the lake. The one closest to the garden on the left is healthy and vibrant and perfect, pristine. It's an ideal picture of a cottonwood tree, but 2 stories tall. And the one on the right is got this yin-yang vibe going to it. Because about halfway up, the tree split. And the left side of the tree grew tall and regal and perfect and pristine, and the right side of the tree is dead. It's twisted and warped and knotted and sun-bleached, and it's an odd tree. And you're sitting there and you're discussing with passerbys the various animals and how gorgeous the sun looks, dappling the water. It looks like there's buried treasure. Grandma is sitting next to you for some reason, chuckles. The idea of swimming in this lake. It's a man-made lake. It was so obviously made for swimming. It's the perfect temperature year-round. It is for swimming. The teal water beckons you. But you're sitting here, listening to Grandma chuckle, talking about the meadowlarks and watching the sky. And then you notice a commotion down in the garden at the bottom of the hill. A goose is running at breakneck speeds out of the garden. It is terrified. Something in the garden very much so scared the goose, and this makes Grandma chuckle more. Now the goose circles the little garden shed down there that Grandma has painted with her typical motifs. You've got paintbrush flowers, you've got meadowlarks, you've got rolling landscapes. From the midst of one of the rolling landscapes is this peacock. While it matches her art style, it's not something you've ever seen her paint before. And this peacock, no matter how you look at it, is looking directly at you with a kind of a square-up expression. This peacock is cocky. This goose is terrified. It's just a Canadian goose, but geese are pretty scary. So I don't really want to meet whatever has this goose bolting from cover. It meanders its way and stops at the bottom of the very, very pristine cottonwood tree. It must think it's safe because it starts to settle down. Calmly, it ruffles its feathers and gets all situated. Maybe it's gonna take a nap, but it's chillaxing. And slinking in from the desert, you see this fat coyote. And it's the fattest, laziest coyote you've ever seen. But it thinks that goose looks like a meal. And it sneaks up behind the goose, and the goose is having none of it. But the goose doesn't have to do much. It just waddles away. And the coyote doesn't follow. Not worth it to that bad coyote. This poor goose is having a heck of a day. No one will let it rest. The coyote slinks back out to the desert. Grandma is not amused by the coyote. She just thinks he's the laziest thing. He should have eaten that goose. You're slightly relieved because the goose is having a rough enough day. You can just see the goose's head poking out from in front of the rocks that are at the base of the hill. Its head slowly stops moving and it's come to rest again. And that's when the garden starts rustling. The raspberry bushes writhe as this peacock emerges. And the peacock starts kind of small, beautiful gem tones. Obviously the one painted on the shed. There's no doubt in your mind that that is the peacock that inspired the shed. But this peacock, he comes out of the garden explosively and quite rapidly goes from being a small peacock to being huge. It's larger than life. He's the size of 3 or 4 peacocks, and then he's the size of a car, and then this peacock lights in the tree on the craggly, twisted branch. And that's why that branch is all warped. That's why that branch is dead. This peacock has been nesting there for a while. This tree is the perfect size for the peacock. Its tail brushes the ground so gracefully. This barely touching the grass, and its comb brushes the underside of the top branch of the tree. This tree and this peacock grew together. They are made for each other. This peacock, however, is not done with that goose. That goose is getting no rest today. The peacock locks eyes with the goose and ruffles its feathers and takes wing again. It is massive. It is dragon-esque. It is unbelievable. The gem tones and the sunlight filtering through the feathers. And this goose, to its credit, is holding its ground. The goose and the massive peacock spiral and twist and battle, and the goose is not winning, but it is not losing, and they slowly cartwheel and tumble and spiral up the craggly hill. And once they're finally near the house and you have to lean into the glass to see them tossing and turning and battling beneath you, poor goose. The poor goose's death blow is finally dealt. The peacock slashes 3 crimson red slashes across the goose's poor face, and the goose falls down, defeated, exhausted, dead, perfectly in the center of one of those massive white and burgundy leaves that surround the house. This makes Grandma chortle even more. She is cackling up a storm as the goose starts to sizzle and smoke. The peacock, sated by finally battling the goose and winning, shrinks down to peacock-sized and lights upon the same leaf. It immediately regrets its choice as its feet start to dissolve. The leaf, however, has no intention of losing this. It wraps around them, not unlike a rock dropped into a blanket. It encompasses and coils around them, closing tight, so you can no longer see either bird. There is no visible struggle, but moments later, the leaf unfurls, and there is nothing left. No skeletal remains, no feathery tufts, no scratch marks. The dragon of a peacock and the goose who almost beat it are both gone. While you're looking down at this apparently carnivorous flower that your house is the center of, you notice all the other plants that dot the house garden are also carnivorous. There's Venus flytraps and pitcher plants, and they're beautiful, but nothing there is normal. Nothing there belongs in the desert. And you look at Great Grandma, and she thinks it's the funniest thing. I planted those, she says, so proud of herself. Several other family members filter through the room, and you have to retell the story. None of them believing you that the peacock got massive, or that the goose held its own, or that the plants around the house ate it. They go, well, there are pitcher plants, but I don't think those could eat a bird. You go, well, those aren't the ones that ate it. It was the leaves. And they go, no, it wasn't the leaves. Grandma looks you dead in the eye and goes, tell me the story again, so I don't forget. And you tell her the story. You start by painting the scene that you're both still sitting in, and how beautiful the light looks, and how the lake looks like there's sunken treasure in it just because of how the light bounces off the surface, and how that tree and that peacock have grown together and are made for each other. And you tell her about how the plants are all carnivorous. And the house looks like the center of a big carnivorous flower. And she smiles. And that smile spreads almost a little further than it should. And she goes, and the peacock, a beautiful peacock, so dragon-esque. And you're like, yes, it was like a dragon. Its feathers were more akin to scales than feathers, but the jewel tones and the way they flitted in the wind, they were feathers. Or were they scales? It's hard to remember. So she tells you to tell her the story again. And you tell her how the peacock grew to the size of a building and was a dragon. And you tell her how it barely beat the brave goose, and how they both still got eaten in the end. And she smiles and she goes, you will remember this. You have to remember this. We have to remember this. Even when we wake up. Anyway, it's eerie and off-putting, and I don't understand any of it, and it's beautiful. Just the serene gardens that also eat living creatures, and the lovely lake that must hold secrets if it made her chuckle like that, especially if the house-eating birds made her chuckle like that. And it's just all so astounding. I had to share it. It's beautiful, it's gorgeous, and don't worry, I have more.